welcome to Sunny IS. Vacho, let's quickly revise what we had studied in the yesterday's class. We have already started the discussion around some of the important topics in the thoughts unit, in the perspective unit, right? And in the yesterday's class, we have started the discussion around thinkers. Let's quickly revise it. As many times you will be revising the concepts of thought, you will be having more clarity. So we had started with the discussion around thinkers, and I told you to draw a table. Okay, so starting from the classical antiquity time periods, Greeks, okay, and Romans. So classical antiquity, Greeks, we had memorized the mnemonic, that is hot and heavy hero all English hippo. Okay, Homer, Thales, Anaximander. Okay, Tacitus, Herodotus, Alexander, Aristophanes. Okay, Hipparchus. So we have taken the different mnemonics. I hope you will be able to remember the names of the thinkers. Otherwise, it is a difficulty to remember the names, right? Then Strabo told me Romans, where there were now discussions specifically around the regional geography, the chorological sciences, right? And after that, we have taken the discussion around the Indian thinkers and then the Arabs, okay? So happy Matbhag, inside be kind, right? So I hope you remember the mnemonics, the discussions, okay? So Hawkal, Masudi, Baruni, Idarsi, Batuta, and Khaldun, okay? So already now you have the name of almost, let's say, somewhere around 14, 15 thinkers, right? So if you will be able to remember the name of thinkers and their contributions, you will have enriched answers, right? In your answers, you must quote the name of thinkers and their contributions so that your answers look like a well-read answer. हाँ, इस बच्चे को thoughts पता है, right? Next, let's move towards the other discussion. Okay. So this is the time period. Let's write down the chronology again. So time periods of Greeks and Romans. The Dark Ages. The time periods associated with Arabs. And then Age of Voyages. So it's not that exploration and voyages were missing from the previous time periods, but they had started prominently during this time period. Okay, so exploration towards those areas which were hitherto unexplored, terra incognita. I hope you remember such terms. Okay, so that had led to the initialization into the age of exploration or the age of voyages. Okay, where the new lands were being discovered. And there were travels and voyages towards those areas which were hitherto unexplored. Okay, so hence the age of voyages, the age of explorations, that is somewhere starting from 15 to 16, 17 CE, it continues. Now during this time period, okay, there were important contributions by travelers like, you can keep on jotting down as we speak, okay. So there were important contributions by the travelers such as Columbus, Vasco da Gama, Magellan, etc. Okay. Initially, the age of voyages was started by the explorations which were done by Portuguese. Which was carried forward which was carried forward by Spaniards. Okay, so Portugal, Spain, they were the initial pioneers in the explorations, and later on which was carried forward by the other nations. Okay, which was carried forward by the other nations. So for example, Great Britain, okay, by Great Britain, people from France, Germany, etc. So under the age of explorations, first of all, there was discovery about the regions around Latin America and Caribbeans, and later on the New World and in North America. Okay, eventually leading to the discovery of the other places in vicinity. Okay, then the trading routes were also developed towards Indian Ocean, and trade with India also started. We also know the contributions, for example, that of Vasco da Gama, etc. Then new routes were discovered via west towards India. Okay, earlier it was via east. Then once the circumambulation of the earth was being done, okay, so travels around the world were being done, then the new routes were being discovered towards India via west. Now, what was the perspective of these voyages, these exploration? This was mainly with respect to the trade of spices and silk. So new trading routes were being discovered with respect to the spices and the silk. And hence, it eventually led to the development of the system that we know now as colonialism. Okay, because that was quite beneficial for these countries which had explored the new routes, and they now know about these areas which are having rich production of the spices, where there is the production of the silk cloth. Okay, so importing the raw material and exporting the manufactured items. Okay, so eventually this was beneficial for few countries. Okay, but this led to the discovery of new trading routes, and it provided impetus to transportation and communication. Especially via the sea trading routes. So which gave a spur to inter-country transportation and trade. However, that is another matter of fact, that because of the aspects, that is, for example, the trade of spices, the cultivation of plantation crops, etc., has also led to the slave trade, unfortunately. Okay, so this is the time period of age of voyages, age of exploration. So the time periods of Greeks and Romans that was associated with majorly the observations which happened, okay, around the places in vicinity where the people were residing. They were making observations around them. But however, with the opening of the new routes and with the opening of the new trade channels, then there were the exploration of new places. And with the exploration of the new places, first of all, person tends to write down whatever he is observing. Isn't it so? So hence, cosmographies, that is the written account of new places and people with whom there was interaction, that started to be written down in form of cosmographies. In form of cosmographies. Okay. Eventually, as there was a lot of traveling that was happening, this also led to cartography and map making. So our knowledge with respect to places and locations, that was also increasing. So hence our idea around location, okay, around places, that was getting modified now. Okay, we had more accurate information about the places, and hence map making became more accurate. Okay, it became more accurate. Now let's move to the other discussion, that is more important one from the perspective of today's discussion. Okay, pre-classical phase in geographical thought. Okay, please don't write down, please listen to me first. VIHR. Okay, so vast imagination, how rare. Now this is the mnemonic. Okay, so vast imagination, how rare. Let's learn the name of thinkers. Sovereignius, Immanuel Kant, Humboldt, and Ritter. Very important name of thinkers, those thinkers who have laid the foundations for geography. And more importantly, when we talk about Humboldt and Ritter, they are the thinkers who have prominently laid down the foundation for the modern geographical thought. Now please listen to me very carefully. The time period of Arrhenius and Kant, this is the time period of the pre-classical phase. The period of Arrhenius and Kant and some of the thinkers from Age of Voyages. Okay, so the time period prior to Humboldt, okay, belonging to Arrhenius, Kant and the other thinkers, that time period is the pre-classical phase. This time period, which includes the contributions from important thinkers like Humboldt and Ritter, this is called as the classical phase of geographical thought. or the modern phase? Classical phase or modern phase? I hope this is clear to you. So the time periods of vast imagination, that is Varenius and Immanuel Kant. This is the pre-classical phase. This is the classical phase or the beginning of the modern phase of geography. That is from Humboldt and Ritter. Okay. Vast imagination, how rare. Remember this by this particular mnemonic. Isn't vast imagination rare? So generally people tend to think in a very narrow-minded fashion. Okay. Whenever we are talking about the different conceptions, whenever we are talking about the different preconceived notions, etc. Okay. So generally we tend to think in a narrow manner, and that is why I've written vast imagination, how rare. Okay. We are hardly able to think beyond what is just lying next to us. That is tomorrow or day after tomorrow, or maybe 15 days or 1 month. Somebody who can visualize 10 years ahead of him or her, or 20 years ahead of him or her, would entail thinking in a large manner, vast imagination, right? So vast imagination, how rare. Okay, Varenius, Immanuel Kant, Humboldt and Ritter. Some very, very important contributions. And also, this is the time period which has been associated with the development of the fundamentals of geography as the independent subject, and also laying down the fundamentals of geography in form of modern geographical thought. Okay. So now let's try to understand the contributions of Varenius, Kant, Humboldt and Ritter. Okay. So now you need not make the table again. You can simply write down the name of the thinker, Varenius. Wherever there will be miscellaneous information, I'll be telling you. You need not make the table now. You can just keep on jotting down as I'm dictating. Varenius, very important contributions, write down Varenius. Okay. So German, Varenius, contributions in the 17th century. Okay. Now please understand that I'm trying to make you understand some important aspects before I start the discussion on Varenius. Please try to understand that. So for example, these are the new mobiles that we are having now, right? But these are the very recent developments, right? Earlier, such mobile phones were not existing. There were small mobile phones which were having only keypads and which were not having smart screens, not touch screens. We could only type the messages. Nokia wale purane mobile aate the. Most of you must have not seen that. They were coming in the time periods of 2002, 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. वो वाला time period था. Smartphones ज़्यादा आए market में somewhere around 2009-10. Okay, and then also smartphones were not like the smartphones we are having now. They were mostly in the form of keypads. Now hardly you will see any mobile phone with keypad, right? So as a person, my thought process is that smartphones are good, smartphones are handy, they have more utility. There is no need to type in form of keypad. It is not very bulky, they are thin, etc. They have many features and all of that. But as a person, I also think that the phones which had the keypad ones were better. Why? Because so many features were absent. Now we are almost carrying a mini computer, a mini laptop in our pockets every time. And we are consuming a lot of time on these smartphones. Whereas the earlier phones, they were very rudimentary type. We could only utilize them in a form of sending message, calls, and one or two more functions like clicking pictures and all of that. So probably we had more time for our families. we were engaging with our friends, etc. Now, human relations have been impacted because of the penetration of smartphones at this scale. This is my thought process. But I'm not against the smartphones. I'm saying that they are very handy when I want to send an email, when I want to have a Zoom meeting, a Google Meet, etc. So probably my thought process is such that I'm favoring both the phones, जो पुराने वाले phones थे, the earlier phones, and also the smartphones, the phones that we carry nowadays. Even if I'm talking about both the phones, doesn't mean that I'm creating a dichotomy. I'm creating a thought process that one of the other must be favored. No. I'm talking about the existence of two kinds of the phones, but I'm not against any one of them. Understood? Now let's start the discussion around Varenius, and then we will try to understand what do we want to understand from this particular example. Okay? So Varenius, keep on writing down. So Varenius was the first thinker. Okay? Was the first thinker to have identified two types of geographical studies. So as per Varenius, there are two types of geographical studies, which are A, the regional studies, B, the general studies, or the systematic studies. So write down, Varenius was the first person to have identified two types of geographical studies. Okay. So one is general and other is special or particular. And the other is the general or the universal. Write down, Varenius divided the geographical studies into particular or universal. Into particular or universal. Okay? Into particular or universal. Hence, he identified the two different. Hence, he identified the two different types of geographical studies. I hope you remember the second question. Where? At regional or the systematic? So Varenius is the first person to identify that geography can be either particular or special, or geography can be universal or general. But next point, very, very important point, underline it or double underline it. Okay. However, Varenius did not create any dichotomy between the two. So as per Varenius, geography can be either special or particular or general or universal. These are the two modes of geographical studies. But Varenius is not saying that we need to choose one amongst the two. Geographical studies can be special or particular at a small scale, but it can also be universal by making laws. It can be also gross generalizations by making laws. So he is not creating a dichotomy. Now what do we mean by dichotomy? In simple terms, dichotomy would mean two opposing viewpoints. So one viewpoint which is contradictory to another. For example, a dichotomy between physical geography and human geography. One set of thinkers is saying geography needs to be physical geography because we are studying about landforms, because we are talking about the evolution of landforms. Geography needs to be physical geography. Whereas another set of thinkers says that no, there is human intervention in the landscapes, human prominently modify landscape. Geography needs to be human geography. These are contradictory to each other, where one is excluding the humans, whereas the second is negating the important role of the physical aspects in geographical study. Here, these two are opposing to each other only when there is a dichotomy. But Varenius is not saying that geography should be only special or geography should be only general. Varenius is saying geography can be either special or general. But Varenius had given us, for the first time, two different approaches for geographical studies, which can be regional and can also be general. Next point, write down. Okay. He has written accounts on the regional geography. For example, the regions of, Thailand, Japan, etc. Thailand, Japan, etc. Okay. So he has given us the regional account of the regions around Thailand, Japan, etc. He is talking about the cultures, the religion, the customs, the traditions around Japan. Keep on jotting down. Okay. Around Japan. A more detailed description and an important work of Varenius is Geographia Generalis. Geographia Generalis. Okay. So write down, an important work of Varenius was Geographia Generalis, published in 1650. Published in 1650. Where he gives account of the two types of geographical studies, that is regional and systematic. Regional and systematic. Okay. He is also a bit deterministic in interpretation because he is acknowledging, okay, he is acknowledging the role of the external environment on man. But he is because promoting the systematic studies, because he is promoting the evidences, the facts, and that is why from this time period we see, okay, that there is the development of the traces of scientific thought process in the geographical studies. Okay. So, for example, Varenius has given us the accounts with respect to the climatic regionalization, he says that equator is not the hottest zone, okay, on earth. The subtropical deserts are the hottest ones, are the hottest. Understood? So subtropical deserts are the hottest ones. So write down. As per the observations of Arrhenius, equator is not the hottest zone. Equator is not the hottest zone. Whereas the subtropical deserts are the more hot ones, are the more hot zones. Okay, are the more hot zones because he promoted the scientific investigation and systematic studies okay, systematic studies. So ये आइडिया निगेट हो गया ना. पहले हम क्या पढ़ रहे थे अभी तक, ग्रीक्स के टाइम पीरियड तक व्हाट वी वर स्टडी, दैट इज एक्यूमीन एंड नॉट एक्यूमीन. नाउ दैट stands negated, isn't it so? So write down in bracket, this is not in accordance with the idea of the climatic zonation that was being provided by the Greeks. I hope this is clear to you. Okay, by the Greeks. A very important aspect, that is, he's talking about the landscape. Landscape, as per him, involves the study of culture, government, traditions, okay, language, transport, and along with that, the physical aspects. So this landscape must be studied in such a manner that we are trying to understand about culture, government, tradition, language, transportation, physical aspects, etc. So hence, as per this idea, this becomes the cultural landscapes. Okay, the idea was more prominently discussed in the works of Kalsor, but for now, let's understand what does he means by the study of cultural landscape. Okay, so write down, as per Varenius, the cultural landscapes entails the study of religion, art, culture, language, government, etc. etc. Okay, but his ideas are more scientific in nature. Are more scientific in nature. So hence in crux, when we talk about Varenius, so Varenius ideas are both regional but are also systematic, but he is not promoting any dichotomy. And when he's talking about the study of the landscapes, that also includes the study of culture, tradition, government, languages, etc. So it is not excluding the man itself from the landscape. I hope this is clear to you. Okay. Next, write down Immanuel Kant. Contributions of Immanuel Kant are very, very important. Some geographers are also of the perspective that one is the geography prior to Kant and another is the geography after Kant or from Kant. So the time period onwards, Kant becomes important because he has influenced the other thinkers also. Okay, so Kant's work has also influenced the regional thinkers, and he has influenced the thinkers such as Ritter, etc. Okay, so hence Kant's contribution are very important from the perspective of the geographical studies. So write down a few points, then I will explain it to you. Write down Immanuel Kant clearly identified two types of studies. Two types of studies. A, one are the historical studies and B are the geographical studies. A are the historical studies B are the geographical studies. Now imagine that during his lifetime, he did not travel more than 10 miles or somewhere around 15-20 kilometers away from his birthplace. So, where he was born, where he had studied, where he did his complete education, etc. That was around a very small area, very small radius. So, he never traveled more than 15-20 kilometers away from that place. So, isn't it quite a surprise? Nowadays, we have to travel that much even for our basic things. For example, if you have to come to study or if you have to go to work, you will travel even more than this on a daily basis. But yes, that was the life of Immanuel Kant. I cannot imagine such a life. I must have traveled more than thousands and thousands of kilometers within a single year. I love traveling, right? I cannot imagine the life of Kant, how he could have restricted himself to such a short distance of travel. I think he was not quite comfortable with traveling. Otherwise, how could he remain restricted to a small circle, small radius, small diameter where he was born, right? So 10-20 kilometers, the distance which you must have covered within a span of 3-4 days. So jokes apart, Immanuel Kant talks about two types of studies. One are the historical studies and the other are the geographical studies. So historical studies and geographical studies, how did he differentiate between the both of them? Let's try to understand that. As per Immanuel Kant, historical studies are those studies which studies the phenomena across time. Whereas the geographical studies are those studies which studies the phenomena across space. So regions lying side by side. Across space. Now let's try to understand that. What do we mean by this? Historical studies. We are trying to understand the phenomena across time. What have been the changes across time, right? So for example, what were the developments in 1800s, 1850, 1900s, 1950, 2000, 2020, what will be the changes in 2050, etc. So we are trying to understand the phenomena across time. Hence, these are the studies which are studying the chronology. So these becomes the particular studies, okay, which studies the chronology. So chronological sciences, because it is studying the chronology. Whereas when we are trying to understand the geographical studies, what are the geographical studies? They study the phenomena which is lying side by side. We have divided this space into different regions and we are trying to understand the interrelationship between the phenomena across regions. And these regions are lying side by side in the same space. So hence, we are trying to understand the phenomena lying side by side. And because we are trying to study this phenomena across those units which have been divided across the space, this is also the chronological sciences. Or the chronology. Chronological sciences or the chronology. So he differentiated chronology from chorology. Chronology from chorology. Okay. Now these small units where we are studying the interrelationship of phenomena is called as the areal units. So write down Immanuel Kant for the first time differentiated between chorology and chronology. Chorology and chronology. Chorology versus chronology. As per Kant, geographical studies are around the study of the phenomena lying side by side. Phenomena lying side by side. Across small units which are called as the areal units. Which are called as the areal units. Which are called as the areal units. Okay. And hence geography studies the phenomena lying side by side in a space. In a space. Now, because of subject matter itself, as per Kant, because of subject matter as per Kant, historical studies are narrative in nature. Historical studies are narrative in nature, whereas the geographical studies, because they focus on the study of regions, are descriptive in nature. Are descriptive in nature. Are descriptive in nature. Are descriptive in nature. Okay. So I hope this is clear to you. Next point, write down. Kant is more inclined towards empirical phenomena. More inclined towards empirical phenomena. Okay. Something like you must go and observe and find the facts rather than being an armchair geographer. Okay. Rather than on believing on the hypothesis, etc., we must observe, we must have facts, and on the basis of the observations, we must make the laws. Okay. Okay, एक साइड में और लिखो, I forgot to tell you something. Write down in the column. Okay, what is deductive versus inductive? So deductive is when we are trying to deduce from general to special or particular. Whereas inductive is from particular to general. So deductive is, for example, I will give you examples, you will understand. So for example, there's too much pollution in Delhi. Okay. So generally we have a notion that if there is a lot of pollution in Delhi, then some specific areas in Delhi must be polluted necessarily. So because there is a lot of pollution in Delhi, Karol Bagh must be polluted also. Okay. So this is the generalization that we are making from general to particular. Right? Secondly, let's try to understand what do we mean by inductive. So when we are talking about inductive, let's try to understand what do we mean by that. Okay. So for example, if you are visiting one district across Himachal, okay. So for example, if you are visiting some of the relatively plain areas, so what do you see? In the plain areas, you see that the agriculture is very prosperous. Okay. So for example, let's take the example of solar. So you see that agriculture is very prosperous and generally there are multiple crops which are being sown. So you make a deduction that is because there is a lot of cropping that is going on in Solan, because the production systems are such that there is huge production annually. There are a lot of crops being sown across Solan. That means in general, across Himachal, there must be plentiful of crops which are being sown. There must be multiple cropping systems, and in general, the production will be very high. Now, this is inductive approach, that is from particular towards general. Okay. But inductive approach may or may not be true. For example, can we say the Malthusian approach was inductive in nature? Yes. So, proposing a law or proposing gross generalizations on the basis of observations around one particular area, that will amount to inductive methods, which may or may not be true, because you have observed only the areas around you where you have recited, etc. Okay, so write it down. Okay, inductive and deductive. Close the bracket. Now come back to that discussion that we were doing. Okay, now I will read one line. You will just understand what I meant to say. Hartshorne is because, okay, also re-emphasizing the fact, reiterating the fact which has been underlined by Kant. So geography and history fill up the entire circumference of our perceptions. Geography, that of space, and history, that of time. Okay. Geography, that of space, and history, that of time. This fact was reiterated by Hartshorne. Hartshorne in 1930s. Okay. So I'm repeating it again. Geography and history fill up the entire circumference of our perceptions. Geography, that of space, and history, that of time. Okay. So the idea was reiterated by Hartshorne. Okay. Now this idea that is geography is descriptive, geography is chorological in nature. Okay. So that idea was also later on taken up by the other thinkers. So write down, as per Kant, geography is descriptive. So this idea that is geography as chorology, which was given by Kant, was later on taken up by Hettner. Okay. Geography as descriptive, chorological sciences. Okay. But for Hettner, chorology had a different interpretation. Okay. He was not much into description. Hettner was of the purview that it should be more about explanations. So geography as chorology was more descriptive for Kant, whereas for Hettner it was more explanatory in nature. Okay, it was more explanatory. Next point, write down, Kant's geography was also anthropocentric in nature. Anthropocentric in nature. That is, he is paying more importance to the prominent role of man. Okay, role of man especially in the regional studies. So he is recognizing the important role of man, bacho. So this idea of Kant was later on taken also by Ritter. His approach was also anthropocentric. This idea that geography is anthropocentric, this idea of Kant was also later on taken up by Ritter. Okay. So write down one important point. Kant's geography was also including the human racial groups, their physical activities on earth along with the physical landscape. Hence, Kant's geography is not like the geography which promoted only the study of physical aspects in geography. Okay. Not as perceived with respect to only physical aspects in geography. Now see, there is another very important contribution by Kant later on which we will take in the discussion of humanistic geography. So write down. So he's talking about the perception of the world by man. A, the perception by inner senses. By outer senses. So these are the cells and this is the mensch. So these are the two landscapes. A is a mountain topography and B is a desert topography. Now there are two persons, person 1 and person 2. Okay. So for person 1, this landscape is an idealistic landscape, possibly because he was born in a mountain topography, right? He was born in a place with high altitude mountains. He is very fond of mountains and he wants to frequently visit these areas. Now because he is residing in some other area, but he is very fond of this. Now why he is fond of this is because his experiences of the childhood and now in the adolescence age is still carrying those fond memories and he is very fond of this particular landscape. Whenever he will get the time, he will frequently want to wander to mountain areas. He is fond of the mountains, the rivers, the entire landscape, the people, they are simple, etc. So his inner senses and outer senses both, they want to visit the mountain landscapes. He is very fond of this area, that is his perception. He is not at all fond of the desert landscape. Whereas person 2 is very fond of desert landscape. He likes those areas which are having higher temperatures and where there is scarcity of populations. Okay, he can explore those areas. He wants to interact with tribals. He wants to see that area, wants to make description of those places, etc. Now that is his perception, possibly because his father was a photographer and he resided in such desert landscape for a larger period of time in his childhood, and now he's fond of desert areas. Both of them are carrying different interpretations about two regions as how they perceive that particular environment, inner senses and outer senses. So hence the interpretation can be different on the basis of what I think about a region and what you think about a region. So Kant was also one of the initial geographers who acknowledged the important role of man in the geographical studies, and that humans' perception is also an important determining factor in the geographical studies. It is important that we must study the laws, theorems, etc. in the geographical studies, but we need to also acknowledge the fact that human perceptions can be variable, and we will be studying this more in detail in the humanistic geography. Okay, so write down a few points here. Kant's work are important because because they reiterated because they reiterated or you can say reiterated, you can write down, because they emphasized on the prominent role of man in the geographical studies. Important role of man in the geographical studies. In bracket write down anthropocentric. His approach is anthropocentric. Now write down. He is reiterating the fact that humans' perception must be taken into account. Humans' perception must be taken into account while doing the geographical studies, because human perceptions can be variable. Write down this example now. They can be variable from one person to another person. So although the geographical studies should be empirical in nature, but must also take into account human perceptions. Very, very important point. You will understand it in more detail when we will discuss the concepts around quantitative revolution, humanistic geography, etc. Okay? यहाँ पर इस point के बाद mark a star and write in bracket. This concept is to be used in the discussion around humanistic geography. Discussion of humanistic geography. Okay. Now next, very importantly, in his works he is also identifying the different branches of geography. What all are the domains of geography? Okay. So basically he is saying that we can study the earth from the perspective of geographical studies in different manners. What are those? Write down. Which encompasses. Okay. So one is mathematical study of the earth in form of mathematical geography. Another can be the political geography, where we are studying about the government. Okay, later on also about the interrelationship between man, different regions in context of geopolitics, etc. Right? Next, economic geography, etc. But he is not discarding human geography. Okay, or the physical geography. He's saying that anthropocentric perspective is important, but he's not negating the fact that physical geography is important, right? So in his works, there are references to rivers, mountains. Write down. In his works, there are references to physical aspects in geography, like oceans, rivers, mountains, etc. Oceans, rivers, mountains, etc. But his idea is more empirical in nature. It's departure from theology. Previously, there were more emphasis on the concepts around theology. Okay. But now there is a departure from those thoughts. Okay. Now I hope you remember Plato. Plato acknowledged that humans can act as a passive or an active agent. Okay. Who can bring the changes on the face of the earth. Similarly, Kant is also of the perspective that humans can induce the changes on the surface of the earth. However, Kant is not inducing any dichotomy between human and physical geography. He is only acknowledging that man has the potential to change the face of the earth. So next, write down. As per Kant, human actions have the potential to change the face of the earth. Face of the earth. However, Kant does not induce any dichotomy between human and physical geography. Okay. यहां हमने लिखा था here we had written Hettner. यही एक बार साइड में लिखो इन अ कॉलम राइट डाउन जहां थोड़ा सा यहाँ स्पेस होगा आपका कॉलम में राइट डाउन इन दिस डिस्कशन कांत Hettner sorry Kant Ritter Hettner and Reckless. This is with respect to chorology. So name of these thinkers must be included whenever there is question around these concepts. So Kant, Ritter, Hettner and Reckless. I hope this is clear to you. Okay. So this is the discussion with respect to Vorenius and Kant. Okay. So I hope this is clear to you, Vorenius and Kant. Now next very important time period, that is the classical phase of geography. And the foundations of modern geographical thought. Vast imagination, how rare. So this is the time period of the classical phase of geography. That is the foundations of modern geographical thought. Okay, which entails the contribution from and Ritter. Very important thinkers. Although there are no dichotomies, but there is more inclination towards physical aspects, study of physical aspects in geography, like plants, etc. Ritter talks about both integrated studies, human and physical. Human and physical. Okay. His focus is more on systematic geography. Whereas his is from regional geography. Okay, systematic and regional. There is still no dichotomies as such, but an inclination more towards systematic and more towards regional geography. I hope this is clear to you. Okay. His approach is more scientific in nature. His is more teleological. Some bit of faith in God, but yes, he's talking about also the empirical observations. Okay, but the common aspect is that both are talking about the organic unity. I hope you remember that. In one of the class, I had told you about this concept. Both talks about the concept of organic unity. The concept of Zusammenhang and Naturganzen. Okay, Zusammenhang and Naturganzen. So hence, let's start the discussion with respect to Humboldt and Ritter now. Okay, Humboldt and Ritter. Now let's start the discussion with respect to individual thinkers. So Humboldt was contradictory in nature. He was not restricting himself to 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers of radius. He was traveling wide apart across different places. So he has the traveling accounts and the accounts of the places wherever he was visiting. He used to observe both physical and the human phenomena. And there is also a book published where there are account of his voyages, okay, all the aspects that he has observed during his voyages in form of a book called as Cosmos, okay. So keep on jotting, okay. Humboldt was an traveler who had traveled extensively, especially towards Latin America, across Atlantic, and he has given detailed account of the places across Latin America. Okay, Next point. In his works, we find the references with respect to latitudes, longitudes, the different type of rocks, the different type of plants. But very importantly, okay, he's also trying to find out the variabilities in the vegetation. So he's keenly observing the variations in vegetation. Okay, also probably because he was traveling with a co-passenger who was a botanist. Okay, so basically he's trying to find out that vegetation is variable, and vegetation is variable on the accounts of the differences in climate, the differences in altitudes. Keep on writing down. Okay, differences in climate, altitude, temperature, etc. All of which have an impact on vegetation because he is very keen observer. Next point. In his accounts, we find references with respect to the winds, the pressure, altitude, temperature of the regions, etc. So, for example, he has also given us the accounts about the elevation of the Spanish Meseta. Okay. Now, next very important point, write down. He also acknowledges the role of man in changing the landscape where he resides. So, for example, he was traveling towards Venezuela and other parts of South America, where he observed the areas around Lake Valencia. So he observed that because of loss of forests, because of deforestation, and because of increase in the crop cover, there had been a significant decline in the area encompassed by the lake. Now, this is because of conversion of lands or not. So, this becomes an example of land use modifications. So, whenever there is a question on deforestation, whenever there is a question, okay, that is with respect to human activities, how has the landscape changed over a period of time? You can include such examples. So, in the works of, keep on writing down, in the works of Humboldt, there is reference with respect to the changes in the area under Lake Valencia. As per his observations, the area under Lake Valencia had shrunk because of deforestation and changes towards the crop cover. ब्रैकेट में लिखो LULC modifications, land use land cover modifications, LULC modifications, to be used in the answers related with deforestation or land use changes and modification of the landscape as such. Okay. Next, he is although inclined towards the physical aspects in geography, but he is also studying the human phenomena. So write down, he studied about the society and culture of people residing in Cuba. In Cuba, he also acknowledged the presence of poverty and inequality across South America. So he could clearly see the class differentiations, right? Next, he also observed a cold water current of the coast of Peru. Cold water current of the coast of Peru, which is also known now as Humboldt current, because Humboldt had observed the cold current. So write down, which is also referred to as the cold current, the Humboldt cold current. Okay. Hence, he was trying to make interrelationship between the physical and the human phenomena in the regions which he was exploring and where he traveled, because he talked about trade, transportation, cropping systems, towns, villages, etc. in a landscape. Next, he also explored Siberia. Okay, so he also explored the Siberian region. And he also made an interesting observation, that is, so for example, this is the coastline. And as one moves away from the coastline towards interior of the continents, there is a change in temperature. So basically he was talking about the continentality effect. So write down, he also observed the changes in temperature as one moves inwards from the coastline. At the same latitude. So in his works, there is reference to the continentality effect. From his works, the first world map of isotherms was also drawn. Okay, world map of isotherms was also drawn. Okay, world map of isotherms was drawn. So from his works, we see accounts of new terms, isotherms, permafrost, continentality effect, etc. Because he is doing the observations and he is reporting the changes in the phenomena, right? Now, very, very importantly, he is also the first person, okay, to have emphasized on the fact that geography is a separate branch. Okay, geography is a separate branch or a separate subject. Okay, you can say loosely. So he reiterated that geography is a separate subject matter of study or a separate branch which is about the description of world as description of world as a separate branch of knowledge, a separate branch of knowledge. Okay, separate branch of knowledge. So basically, Humboldt is not creating dichotomies, but he is more inclined towards the study of physical aspects and geography. But he is also saying that geography should now be a separate branch with respect to description of Earth. Now he is also keen towards the inductive methods. So his approach is more inductive in nature. That is from particular to general. Next, he also focuses on the important concept, that is the concept of unity. So whenever we are studying the phenomena, we must talk about the organic as well as inorganic components in consonance. So hanging together or zusammenhang. So I hope you remember from our first class discussion, that is, there were the 3 questions which arose in geography. But till this time period, that is Humboldt and Ritter, we were talking about the integrated studies, the concept of organic unity, right? Zusammenhang by Humboldt or Naturgegangen by Ritter. So write down. Humboldt focused on geography as a discipline which is focused on study of both inorganic as well as organic phenomena. And he gave the concept of Zusammenhang, that is hanging together. Okay, Zusammenhang, that is hanging together. So I hope this is clear to you. His methods are empirical but inductive in nature. But he is also inclined towards systematic studies in geography. So he is favoring law making, theory making also. So write down crux in last. Humboldt is more inclined towards systematic geography and law making and theory making on the basis of empirical observations, but his approach is inductive. But his approach is inductive. Okay. So I hope you are clear with respect to Humboldt. Humboldt is not creating any dichotomy. Again, I am repeating, although his observations are more inclined towards physical geography, but he doesn't say that let's exclude man from the geographical studies. No. So although he is giving the observations around the concepts like latitudes, currents, altitude, vegetation, etc., but he is also talking about the economy and society of the people residing in Cuba. So there is no dichotomy as such. He is not saying that man should be excluded from the geographical studies. I hope this is clear to you, right? But his approach is empirical in nature, and he is more inclined towards the systematic studies in geography. But however, he is more inclined towards the inductive approach. Okay, that is from particular to general. Now, let's move to the next thinker. So, we have done Arrhenius, Immanuel Kant, Humboldt, and now Ritter. Write down, Ritter was a teleologist. But his approach is more inclined towards regional geography, okay, away from the systematic approach. But he is also focused on empirical observations. So write down, approach is Ritter's approach is more regional in nature. More regional in nature. Okay. But his focus is on empirical observations. And he is opponent of armchair geography. Armchair geography, that means sitting on a chair and making hypothesis. He is of the perspective of go and explore and observe and then propose laws. Okay. So his approach is empirical in nature. His approach is empirical in nature. He was also the first professor of geography at University of Berlin. At University of Berlin. And his important work was published in the name of Erdkunde or the earth science. Erdkunde or the earth science. Erdkunde or the earth science, which deals with the local conditions and focuses on the different attributes of the place in terms of topography, minerals distribution, distribution of plants and animals, and human characteristics. Okay. In a manner, it can be said that he is the father of or the founder of regional geography. Father or founder of the regional geography. So in a region, is talking about both physical and cultural components and interrelationship amongst them. Interrelationship amongst them. So study of both physical and cultural aspects and interrelationship amongst them, okay, at the scale of areal units. At the scale of areal units. Okay. As per Ritter, naturally bounded areas have a diversity in terms of history, population, culture, climate, production, etc., which separates one naturally bounded areas from the other, and hence is more focused upon the study of these naturally bounded areas. I hope this is clear to you. So hence is more inclined towards the regional geography approach. Okay, regional geography approach. But his approach is more deductive in nature. Okay, his approach is more deductive in nature, but also his approach is scientific in nature. His approach is scientific in nature. Okay. Now, in Adpunde, there are different references with respect to the geographical studies. So write down in Adpunde. Okay. Ritter talks about the major geographical concepts, which are first, the observations must be empirical. So empirical approach. Empirical approach. Second, his emphasis on areal units. So that is regional approach. Okay, first is empirical approach. Second is study of areal